The champagne cork popped at exactly 7:43 p.m., and I watched my son Daniel raise his glass to toast his new bride, Victoria. From my seat in the corner, the last table before the kitchen doors, I smiled and clapped along with everyone else. But my purse felt heavy on my lap, weighted down by a single folded document I'd been carrying for 3 weeks. A document that could change everything. A document I had no intention of sharing. Not yet. Maybe not ever. To understand why I kept silent while my only child celebrated the biggest day of his life, I need to take you back 6 months earlier, to the morning everything started to unravel. I was sorting through my late husband Richard's filing cabinet when I found it. The leather folder was tucked behind old tax returns, its edges soft with age. Inside a deed. A property deed for 340 acres in Montana. Land I didn't know existed, land Richard had never mentioned in our 32 years of marriage. My hands trembled as I read the legal description. Pasture land. Water rights. A main residence described as rustic but structurally sound. An adjacent barn and equipment shed. At the bottom, an appraisal from 2 years ago. The number made my vision blur. $4.2 million. I sat on the floor of Richard's office, still wearing my gardening gloves, dirt smudged on my cheek, and cried. Not from joy. From confusion. From the sharp sting of a secret kept from me even as my husband lay dying 6 months earlier, whispering that he'd taken care of everything. Why hadn't he told me? The answer came 3 days later when I finally worked up the courage to call the property manager listed on the deed. His name was Frank Holloway, and his voice had the rough warmth of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. Mrs. Chin. I've been hoping to hear from you, Frank said. Your husband made me promise not to contact you until you were ready. He said you'd call when the time was right. I don't understand. Why did Richard keep this from me? Frank was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, Richard said he wanted you to have something that was just yours. Something Daniel couldn't. He stopped himself. Something that would be there if you ever needed it. He was very specific about that. My throat tightened. Something Daniel couldn't what? That's not my story to tell, Mrs. Chin. But your husband loved you. And he was protecting you from something he saw coming. I hung up feeling more lost than before. The answer arrived 2 weeks later in the form of Victoria. Daniel brought her to Sunday dinner, his face glowing with that particular light that only new love can kindle. Mom, I want you to meet someone really special. Victoria stepped into my modest Sacramento home wearing a cream silk blouse and designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her handshake was brief, her smile perfect, her eyes calculating every detail of my 30-year-old furniture and faded wallpaper. Mrs. Chin, Daniel has told me so much about you. Her voice was smooth as honey, but something in her tone made me think of appraisers at estate sales. I'd spent all day cooking Daniel's favorites. Dumplings folded by hand the way my mother taught me. Braised short ribs that had simmered for 6 hours. Bok choy with garlic so fresh it made the kitchen smell like heaven. Mango pudding for dessert, the recipe I'd perfected over decades. Victoria picked at everything. It's just so heavy, she murmured to Daniel, not quite quietly enough. All this oil. I'm trying to maintain my figure for the wedding. The wedding. They'd been dating 4 months. Daniel squeezed her hand. Mom's cooking is the best, babe. Just try it. Victoria took a tiny bite of dumpling, chewed thoughtfully, then set down her fork. It's rustic. Very authentic. The way she said authentic made it sound like a polite word for primitive. I felt my mother's apron strings around my waist like a strangling vine. Over dessert, Victoria leaned forward with sudden enthusiasm. Mrs. Chin, Daniel mentioned you own this house outright. That's so smart. Have you thought about what you'll do with it when you're older? The question landed like a stone in still water. I haven't really thought about it. This is my home. Of course, of course. Victoria's smile never wavered. I just mean, eventually. It's a lot of house for one person. And the neighborhood. She glanced toward the window where my neighbor's car sat on blocks in the driveway. I'm sure it was lovely when you moved in. Daniel jumped in. Mom loves this place, Victoria. She's not going anywhere. But Victoria was already moving on. We're looking at houses in Roseville. For bedrooms at least. We'll need the space when we start a family. She glanced at me. You'll want to be close to your grandchildren, right? Have you thought about downsizing? Something smaller, easier to maintain. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't stop hearing that word. Downsizing. As if my life needed to shrink to make room for theirs. The engagement happened 2 weeks later. Daniel called me from a restaurant. She said, "Yes, Mom. We're getting married in 6 months." 6 months. Barely time to plan a proper wedding, let alone understand the person your child was binding their life to. But I said all the right things. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. He seems wonderful." The lies tasted like ash. Victoria took over immediately. The wedding planning became a whirlwind I watched from the outside. She selected the venue without asking my opinion. A winery in Napa, 2 hours from my home. She chose the menu, the flowers, the photographer. When I offered to help, she smiled that perfect smile. "You're so sweet, Mrs. Chen. But I have a planner for all that. You just relax and enjoy being mother of the groom." Mother of the groom. A title that sounded like a role in someone else's play. The real wound came when I saw the seating chart. Victoria had it displayed on an easel during a family dinner at the restaurant where Daniel proposed. A beautiful calligraphy layout showing exactly where everyone would sit. I found my name at table 12. In the back. Near the bathrooms. Daniel's father's siblings, aunts and uncles he saw maybe twice a year, were at table 4. Victoria's college roommates were at table 6. Her yoga instructor was at table 9. I was at table 12. "Is this right?" I asked quietly, pointing to my name. Victoria glanced over. "Oh, yes. We had to put you there because of the sight lines. Don't worry, you'll still see everything." See everything. From the table where they seat plus ones who barely know the couple. That night I went home and pulled out the Montana deed again. I read every word. And for the first time since finding it, I understood what Richard had seen coming. The months before the wedding blurred together in a series of small humiliations. Victoria started referring to my home as the old place. She suggested, gently but persistently, that I might want to update before the wedding, so it doesn't look dated in photos. She never offered to help with costs. Just helpful observations about my peeling paint and outdated kitchen. She asked Daniel in front of me whether I had enough savings to support myself in my retirement years. "Mom's fine," Daniel said, but he looked at me with new eyes. Assessing eyes. "I'm just thinking ahead," Victoria purred. "We want to make sure Margaret is taken care of. It would be terrible if she struggled and felt like she couldn't ask for help." The translation was clear. "We're watching to see if you'll become a financial burden." 2 months before the wedding, Victoria invited herself over for coffee. She arrived with a real estate agent. "Mrs. Chen, this is Amanda. She specializes in helping seniors transition to more manageable living situations." Amanda walked through my home with a practiced eye, tapping notes into her phone. "Great bones. Needs updating. In this market, you could probably get $580,000, maybe $620,000 if we stage it right." "I'm not selling," I said firmly. Victoria's smile tightened. "Of course not right now. We're just exploring options. Daniel and I want you to have all the information so you can make the best decision for your future." My future. As if I weren't sitting right there, capable of deciding it myself. After they left, I called Frank in Montana. "How quickly could I see the property?" I asked. "I can pick you up from the airport tomorrow if you want, Mrs. Chen. I'll book a flight tonight." Montana in late summer is a kind of heaven I didn't know existed. Frank met me at the small regional airport, a man in his 60s with weathered skin and kind eyes. We drove for an hour through rolling hills that seemed to stretch into forever, the sky so big it made me dizzy. "Richard bought this place 20 years ago," Frank explained as we drove. "He used to come out here once a year just to check on things. He'd sit on the porch for hours not saying much. Just looking. Why didn't he tell me?" Frank glanced over. "He said it was his insurance policy. Against the day when being a good mother wasn't enough anymore." The tears came then, hot and fast. The ranch appeared around a curve in the road like something from a dream. The main house was log-built, solid and beautiful, with a wraparound porch and windows that caught the afternoon light. The land rolled away in every direction, dotted with cattle that Frank managed with a small crew. "It's fully operational," Frank said. "Profitable too. Clears about $180,000 a year after expenses. Richard set it up so the money goes into a trust. You've got nearly $3 million sitting there untouched." I walked through the house in a daze. 3 bedrooms. 2 bathrooms. A kitchen with windows overlooking the mountains. Everything simple, clean, and mine. In the master bedroom, I found a letter tucked into the nightstand drawer. Richard's handwriting. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've found our secret. I'm sorry I kept it from you. I wanted to tell you 1,000 times. I bought this place after Daniel turned 20. I saw something in him then. A way he looked at our finances, at what we had versus what his friends' families had. A hunger that worried me. I don't blame him. We raised him to value security. But I needed to know you'd always have a place that was just yours. Somewhere no one could pressure you to give up. Somewhere you could breathe. I hope you never need it. I hope I'm wrong about what I see coming. But if I'm not, if the day comes when you feel small in your own life, remember this place exists. Remember you are not dependent. You are not a burden. You are not someone who needs to shrink to fit into someone else's plans. You are Margaret Chin and you own 340 acres of Montana sky. I love you. Always have. Always will. Richard. I sat on the porch until sunset, watching the light turn the hills gold, then amber, then purple. And I made my decision. I would tell no one. The wedding day arrived like a storm I'd been watching gather on the horizon. I wore my best dress, navy blue with delicate embroidery at the collar, altered to fit by the seamstress at my local dry cleaner. I'd had my hair done at the salon where I'd been going for 15 years. Carol made me look elegant, dignified. You look beautiful, Margaret, she said, fastening the last pin. That son of yours is lucky to have you. I wanted to believe that. The ceremony was lovely. I won't lie about that. Victoria looked stunning in a gown that probably cost more than my car. Daniel looked happier than I'd ever seen him, his eyes never leaving his bride. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman?" Victoria's father stood with pride. No one asked who gave the groom. Apparently, mothers don't get that moment anymore. The reception confirmed every fear I'd harbored. Table 12 was worse than I'd imagined. Tucked in a corner behind a decorative partition, the view of the head table partially blocked by an enormous floral arrangement. My table mates were Victoria's distant cousins from Ohio who knew no one and seemed as confused as I was about why we'd been relegated to this spot. "Are you with the bride or groom?" one asked. "I'm Daniel's mother," I said. "Oh." She looked genuinely surprised. I thought, well, I just assumed you'd be at the family table. So had I. I watched from my corner as Victoria's mother gave a tearful speech about her daughter's journey. As Victoria's father toasted the happy couple with jokes about gaining a son. As Daniel's best man told stories about college adventures I'd never heard before. When it came time for the mother-son dance, a tradition I'd been looking forward to since Daniel was born, Victoria intercepted. "Actually," she announced into the microphone, "we're changing things up. Daniel and I are going to dance with both our mothers at the same time. One big family celebration." So instead of my moment alone with my son, I shared him with Victoria's mother while a photographer captured us all in one big, happy, blended shot. Victoria's mother got the inside position, closer to Daniel. I swayed on the outside, Daniel's hand barely touching mine, while he laughed at something Victoria's mother whispered. 3 minutes. That's how long the dance lasted. 30 years of motherhood reduced to 3 minutes in a shared spotlight. Afterward, Victoria approached my table with a glass of champagne. "Mrs. Chin, are you having fun back here? I wanted to check on you." "It's lovely," I lied. She sat down, smoothing her gown. "I'm so glad. You know, Daniel and I have been talking about the future. About family." She paused meaningfully. "We're hoping to start trying for a baby right away." "That's wonderful. The thing is, we're going to need space. And help." Another meaningful pause. "Have you given any more thought to what we discussed? About downsizing?" There was. At her own wedding reception, she was still calculating assets. "Victoria, this is your wedding day. Let's not talk about this now." Her smile froze. "Of course. But we will need to discuss it soon. Daniel and I have been looking at properties and the market is competitive. If you sold your house, you could help with our down payment and move somewhere smaller. We could all stay close. It would be perfect." The subtext was clear. "Liquidate your asset, give us the money, and we'll allow you proximity to your future grandchildren." "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. Victoria patted my hand, a gesture more condescending than affectionate, and glided away to greet other guests. I left before the cake was cut. No one noticed. The pressure began in earnest 3 weeks after the wedding. Daniel called on a Tuesday evening. Mom, Victoria and I want to talk to you about something important. Can we come over this weekend? They arrived on Saturday with a folder full of documents. Real estate listings. Mortgage pre-approval letters. A spreadsheet labeled Family Financial Planning. Victoria spread everything across my dining room table like a general planning a campaign. Mrs. Chin, we've done the math. If you sell your house and move into a nice apartment, we found several great options in Roseville very close to our new place. You'll have enough equity to help with our down payment and still have plenty left over for your retirement. Daniel added, the places we're looking at are expensive, Mom. We need at least $150,000 for a down payment to avoid PMI. And you want me to provide it. Not provide, Victoria corrected smoothly. Invest. You'd be investing in our future. In your grandchildren's future. When we sell that house eventually, we'll pay you back with interest. Eventually. A word that meant never. What if I don't want to sell? Victoria's mask slipped for just a second. A flash of irritation quickly smoothed over. We're just thinking practically. You're alone in a 4-bedroom house. It's too much for you. What if you fall? What if something happens and no one's there to help? I'm 64, Victoria. Not 90. Of course. But it's never too early to plan ahead. She pulled out more papers. We've also been researching assisted living communities. Very nice ones. Some even have pools and activities. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or cooking. It would be so much easier. Assisted living. For a healthy 64-year-old woman. Daniel looked uncomfortable but said nothing. My son, who'd once defended me from childhood bullies, sat silent while his wife planned to warehouse me. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. Victoria gathered her papers with brisk efficiency. But don't take too long. The housing market moves fast and we don't want to miss the right property. After they left, I sat in Richard's office, holding the Montana deed and cried. Not delicate tears, but the ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose heart is breaking in real time. My phone rang. Frank's number. Mrs. Chin? You okay? You sound upset. I told him everything. The wedding. Fable. The pressure to sell. Victoria's spreadsheets and assisted living brochures. Frank was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? I don't know. Yes, you do. Richard knew you'd know when the time came. He was right. I did know. I want to keep my house. I want to keep my independence. And I want to stop pretending I'm okay with being erased. Then do that, Frank said simply. You've got more than enough to live on from the ranch income. You don't need their approval, and you sure as hell don't need to bankroll their real estate dreams. But Daniel is a grown man who made a choice. You've spent 30 years putting him first. Maybe it's time to put yourself first for once. The next conversation happened a week later when Daniel called to check on my decision. Mom, Victoria and I really need to know what you're thinking. We've got an offer on a house, but we need to move fast. Daniel, I'm not selling my house. Silence. Then, what? But we talked about this. You talked about it. I listened. And my answer is no. Mom, be reasonable. You don't need all that space. We're trying to help you. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was Richard's letter echoing in my head. Maybe it was the memory of Table 12. Maybe it was 30 years of putting myself last finally reaching its breaking point. Help me. Or help yourselves. That's not fair. You know what's not fair, Daniel? Being seated in the back at your wedding like a stranger. Sharing our mother-son dance with Victoria's mother because apparently 3 minutes alone with me was too much to ask. Being told I should sell my home and move into assisted living at 64 so you can afford a bigger house. Victoria just wants what's best for everyone. Victoria wants my money. Let's be honest about that. I can't believe you're saying this. She's my wife. And I'm your mother. But lately I feel like an inconvenient piece of furniture you're trying to store somewhere out of sight. He hung up on me. For 3 weeks my phone stayed silent. No calls. No texts. My son, my only child, had cut me off for refusing to fund his real estate ambitions. I could have caved. Part of me wanted to. The mother part that remembered nursing him through fevers, attending every school play, saving for his college education. But another part, The part Richard had seen and protected, knew that giving in now meant losing myself forever. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Victoria's sister Amanda called me. I'd met her briefly at the wedding, a quieter, gentler version of Victoria who'd smiled sadly at me from across the reception hall. "Mrs. Chin? I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Daniel's phone. Is everything okay? I need to tell you something about my sister. Something you should know." We met for coffee. Amanda was nervous, stirring her latte with shaking hands. Victoria did this before. With her ex-fiancé 3 years ago. My stomach dropped. His name was Marcus. His mother was a widow who owned a small apartment building in San Diego. Within 6 months of their engagement, Victoria had convinced Marcus that his mother needed to sell and move into care. She had spreadsheets just like she does now. Plans for how they'd use the money. What happened? Marcus's mother refused. She saw through it. Victoria broke off the engagement, saying his family was toxic and he'd never stand up to his mother. She always does this. Targets men with widowed mothers who have assets. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Because I love my sister, but I'm ashamed of what she's become. And because my mother did this to our grandmother. Convinced her to sell everything and move into a facility. Grandma died 6 months later, heartbroken and alone. She grabbed my hand. "Don't let Victoria do to you what my mother did to Grandma. Please." Armed with this knowledge, I made my decision. I called a family meeting. Daniel and Victoria arrived at my house with identical expressions of cool expectation. They thought I was surrendering. I served tea in Richard's best china. We sat in my living room where Daniel had taken his first steps, where I'd read him bedtime stories for years. "I've made my decision about the house," I began. Victoria leaned forward eagerly. "And? I'm keeping it. I'm not selling, I'm not downsizing, and I'm not helping with your down payment." Daniel's face flushed red. "Mom, we've been counting on this." "Then you were counting on something that was never yours to count on." Victoria's mask dropped entirely. "This is ridiculous. You're being selfish. We're trying to build a future." "So am I. You're an old woman alone in a too-big house. What kind of future do you need?" The contempt in her voice was finally, fully visible. "The kind where I don't shrink to fit into your plans. The kind where I'm not warehoused in assisted living at 64 so you can have a bigger kitchen." "You ungrateful." Victoria stopped herself, but the venom was there. I stood. "I think you should leave." "Gladly." Victoria grabbed her purse. "Don't come crying to us when you fall and break your hip and there's no one to help you." Daniel hesitated. For a moment I saw my son, the real one, struggling beneath the influence of the woman he'd married. "Dan," I said softly, "I love you. I always will. But I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm." He followed Victoria out without a word. 2 months passed in silence. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count. The house felt emptier than it ever had, even right after Richard died. But it was mine. My space. My rules. My life. I stayed in contact with Amanda, who updated me sadly. Victoria had convinced Daniel that I was mentally declining and making irrational decisions. They were consulting with an attorney about possible conservatorship. They had no idea what I actually owned. The confrontation came on a Thursday afternoon. Daniel and Victoria arrived with a lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Judith who specialized in elder law. "Mrs. Chin, we're concerned about your well-being," Judith began in a tone dripping with false compassion. "Your son tells me you're making questionable financial decisions and isolating yourself from family." I looked at Daniel. "Is that what you think? That I'm incompetent?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. We're just trying to help." Victoria jumped in. "We've prepared a document that would give Daniel power of attorney over your finances. For your protection." Judith slid the papers across my table. I didn't touch them. Instead, I pulled out my own folder. The Montana deed. The trust documents. 3 years of financial statements showing ranch income. The property appraisal. I spread them across the table like a royal flush. "I'm afraid I don't need protection," I said calmly. "I need you to understand that I am not the helpless widow you've been treating me as." Victoria's eyes scanned the documents, her face going pale as comprehension dawned. What is this? This is a 340-acre cattle ranch in Montana that my husband left me. Fully operational. Generating approximately $180,000 annually in income. Currently valued at $4.2 million. The silence was deafening. Judith picked up the deed, examined it, and set it down carefully. These appear to be legitimate legal documents. They are. Along with the $2.9 million in the associated trust account. I looked at Daniel. Your father bought it 20 years ago. He told me it was insurance, against the day when being a good mother wasn't enough anymore. Daniel's face crumbled. Mom, I didn't know. No one knew. That was the point. I gathered the documents. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a conference call with my property manager. And I believe you have a conservatorship to cancel. Victoria grabbed her purse, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. You lied to us. No. I simply didn't tell you everything. There's a difference. You manipulative. Careful, I interrupted. My lawyer is listening on speakerphone. I pointed to my cell phone on the table where my attorney was indeed recording everything. Defamation is actionable. They left in a tornado of indignation and shattered expectations. Judith paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mrs. Chin, you did the right thing. 3 months later, I'm sitting on the porch of my Montana ranch, watching the sun set over land that is mine and mine alone. Daniel called last week. Not Victoria. Daniel. He apologized through tears, saying he'd been blind, that he'd let his wife manipulate him into betraying everything I taught him about integrity and respect. I understand if you can't forgive me, he said. Forgiveness isn't the issue, I replied. Trust is. And trust has to be rebuilt brick by brick. Can I try? You can try. We're taking it slowly. He visits once a month, alone. We talk about real things. His regrets, my hurt, the future we might build if we're both willing to do the work. He's filing for divorce. Apparently, once Victoria realized I wasn't a cash cow, her affection evaporated like dew in Montana sun. As for me, I'm learning who Margaret Chin is when she's not shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. I volunteer at a women's shelter, helping older women escape financial abuse. I've helped 7 women in 3 months, connecting them with lawyers, teaching them to see the warning signs I almost missed. Frank and I have become friends. He teaches me about cattle management and land stewardship. I'm learning to ride horses at 64. It turns out you're never too old to become someone new. My Sacramento house sits empty most of the time now. I might sell it eventually, on my terms, in my time, for my reasons. Or I might keep it just because I can. People ask if I regret keeping the ranch secret during the wedding. If I feel guilty about not telling Daniel earlier. I don't. Because here's what I learned. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to be their safety net when what they really need is to learn to stand on their own. Sometimes protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Richard saw something coming that I couldn't see then. A day when I would need to choose between being small enough to fit into my child's life or being big enough to own my own. He gave me the tools to choose myself. And I did. Last week, a young woman named Sarah came to my ranch. She'd heard about my story through the shelter network. Her daughter-in-law was pressuring her to sign over her house, promising to take care of everything. I sat with Sarah on my porch, poured her coffee, and told her the truth I wish someone had told me sooner. Your children are not entitled to your resources. Your love is not measured by your willingness to diminish yourself. And keeping a secret that protects your dignity is not the same as lying. It's wisdom. Sarah cried. Then she pulled out her phone and called a lawyer. 6 months from now, she'll have her own story of surviving. Of choosing herself. Of learning that being a good mother doesn't mean being a doormat. And she'll pass it on to the next woman and the next and the next. Maybe that's Richard's real legacy. Not just the land he left me, but the permission to claim it. The understanding that love without boundaries isn't love. It's servitude. I don't regret keeping the secret. I regret how long it took me to understand why it needed to be kept. But I'm learning. At 64, on 340 acres of Montana sky, I'm finally learning who I am when I stop apologizing for taking up space. And she's someone I'm proud to be. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what we give, it's what we keep for ourselves. What do you think? Should parents sacrifice everything for their children's dreams? Where's the line between helping and enabling? Share your thoughts below. And if this story resonated, please share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself.